Hello and welcome back to another episode of To Whom It May Concern. I'm your host Malak, here with my co-hosts Mariam, Khawaila, and Inara.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum.
So we're so excited that we get to kick off another Ramadan series. And today we actually have a special guest with us that's going to help us get into the groove of Ramadan and preparing for Ramadan as best as we can. Our guest today is a graduate from the prestigious Madinah University, where he attained his associate degree in Arabic and bachelor's degree from the College of Sharia. He completed his memorization of the Quran at the age of 13 and went on to receive his ijaza from Palestine. He has served as the youth director for the Islamic Center of Naperville in Chicago and became the youth director and assistant Imam of Mecca Center in Willowbrook, Illinois. Here with us today to kick off our Ramadan series is none other than Shaykh Tariq Musleh.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Tariq.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, we're doing good. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you.
Wallahi, I'm very happy and excited to be here. My wife is a big fan of your show, and she's a big listener, so I might get some brownie points by being on the show.
Nice.
Okay, Sheikh, so for our episode today, we wanted to kick off the episode by getting a basic understanding of why Ramadan is actually so important. Like, what's so important about it that it makes up one of the 5 pillars of Islam?
I think that's a wonderful question. I think that a lot of times when we think of Ramadan, we think of fasting, and that's good and that's important. But one of the things that we forget is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the word Ramadan in the Quran, when He says Shahru Ramadan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then highlights what is it that makes Ramadan so unique, so beautiful, so lit of barakah. And that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Shahru Ramadan alladhi unzila fihi al-Quran. That what makes Ramadan so special and unique is the fact that the Quran was revealed in this month. And some people might be like, okay, that's cool and all, something happened 1400 years ago, that's great. But what's actually beautiful about the Quran coming down is that the Quran came down 1400 years ago, but it has never stopped being the living words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning that the Quran, it's not that Allah said 1400 years ago. It's that Allah said 1400 years ago, He's saying today, and the words that He's saying are continuously said ila yawmiddin until the day of judgment, which is why we spend every single year allowing the month of Ramadan to be the month that we celebrate the Quran and we revive and rejuvenate our relationship with the Quran.
That's actually a very good point you bring up, because anytime someone asks me what is Ramadan, I usually start off with saying fasting, but I never really describe it as the month of reconnecting with the Book of Allah.
I kind of default to that answer where it's like, so we can feel with the poor people.
Yeah. My
but
God,
I know that's
if
wrong.
If I had a nickel for every time I heard somebody say so we can feel for the poor people.
I know, but it's such an easier answer to say.
So I mean, it may be an easier answer, and it's definitely an accurate answer, but it's not. I mean, really, just to step back a little bit, in that same section of the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyam, right? That famous ayah that we're all looking forward to hearing, inshallah, that describes Ramadan, right? Mm-hmm. What does that literally translate to? Can anybody tell me, any Arabic language junkies here who can tell me what that means?
I'm going to default to believe.
Fasting was prescribed onto you, and then it
So that's a beautiful, interesting choice of words. Fasting has been prescribed to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the fast of Ramadan as a what? As a prescription. Right?
Like a medicine.
And so what is it that serves exactly.
I'm like, what? Like a doctor healing you.
A medical, see you guys are getting it, mashallah.
Yeah, that's deep. I never thought about it like that.
It's as if the fasting is a prescription, the same way like medication, like you said, sister, barakallahu fiki. And so then the idea is that the reason why we're fasting is so that we can pause all other human appetites that we have. All of our bodily appetites are put on pause so we can focus on the appetite of our spirit, the appetite of our soul, which is in desperate need of the Quran and rejuvenation via the Quran. Our hearts are thirsty for the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our ears are deaf to the sounds of creation and desperate for the sound of the words of the Creator. And all of this is dependent on what? On us. It's as if the entire purpose of us fasting the month of Ramadan is so that we can put on pause all other things that are distracting us so we can focus on fulfilling that spiritual appetite that we have for the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's a very beautiful and wonderful thing to kind of really reflect on. It's that we fast so that when we visit the Quran, we're able to have the hearts and the minds and the eyes and the ears that are best capable of accepting the message of the Quran.
So an important point that I think we should mention is that when we say the word fasting, we usually just think of restraining ourselves, not eating food and drink.
Mm-hmm.
So can we, I guess, go more into details of what actually is incorporated into a fast during Ramadan, outside of Ramadan, but just fasting in general?
So that's a wonderful question again, and I think that there's the cookie cutter Sunday school answer, and may Allah bless all of our Sunday school teachers and Sunday school fast. So when I say that, I don't mean that in a negative way, but I'm saying we're older now, we're grown up, so we need to have more nuanced answers, right? And more depth to our perspective. And so when we think about this question, typically our answer is no, we fast from all bad things. So my teacher said something beautiful about fasting and about the month of Ramadan. I was actually listening to him today, and he was saying that Ramadan madrasa, that Ramadan is a school. It's like a boot camp. And one of the things that he highlighted is that fasting is an act of transformation. It's usually we're constantly snacking, now we're not snacking. Usually we're constantly drinking, now we're not drinking. But he said there's also something that happens while we're fasting, which is that we need to be, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about fasting, when he going back to the ayah of the prescription, right? He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, kutiba alaykum as-siyam. Fasting has been prescribed for you. The ultimate doctor of all healing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says that he's giving us a prescription to heal our souls via what? He gives us a prescription to heal our souls via fasting, right? Mm-hmm. And then he tells us why. He says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you may gain something called taqwa. Now, what is taqwa? A lot of people translate taqwa into fear of Allah. And fear can sound like a scary thing. The first thing I want to clarify about this fear is that fear of Allah is not a fear of terror. Fear of Allah is a fear of reverence. It's a fear of respect. It's a fear of love. Like when my mom was disappointed in me, my mom is the cutest little khato. She's 5'3". And when she used to come with the hanger to hit me, I was afraid. I mean, the hanger would always break after the first hit. You know what I mean? And so physically, I wasn't afraid. And وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلِ الْأَعْلَى, and Allah is above all comparisons. But when we say taqwa is fear of Allah, it's a reverential fear that's out of love and respect. But even that to me is closer to khashya. That's not really when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so you may have taqwa. That's not khashya. That's not fear of Allah. Not even the reverential fear. Taqwa is a mindset of consciousness of Allah, being aware of Allah, being mindful and conscious and aware of Allah. That's what taqwa is. Actually, one of my teachers, he says that taqwa is like a pair of glasses. It's a lens. You see everything in your life in light of knowing who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and knowing who you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isn't that such a beautiful way to look at taqwa? So you look at yourself, you look at the world, and you look at your deen in light of knowing who Allah is and knowing who yourself is. So to go back to the ayah, it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that the purpose of fasting is so that we can get this lens of awareness of Allah, consciousness of Allah, and mindfulness of Allah. So then that means that while we're fasting, that is what our goal needs to be, to become more mindful, conscious, and aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm going to ask you guys now, what are ways, I'm not only going to be the one answering questions here, what are ways that we can become mindful and conscious of Allah through our fasting? Like, how is it that fasting can supplement and cater to us becoming more aware and mindful and conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How so?
I guess for me, with fasting, I'm also stopping myself from doing normal things. Like you mentioned before, eating, drinking, or if some people are into cursing or watching bad things, hearing bad things. In a sense, fasting is having me give up some of those things for the sake of Allah. So that's a conscious effort that I am making. And because it's more constantly throughout the day, it keeps me more aware of my actions and what I'm giving up for Allah.
Absolutely. And for me, Khawaila, and for Shaykh Tariq, what I think of to help me refrain from doing those things is increasing the amount of like dhikr I do. So whether that is through reading more Quran or doing the morning and evening adhkar and making dua. So I feel like that makes it easier for me to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So throughout the day, as I'm fasting, it's easier to starting to do things that are more like God conscious, or like refraining from doing certain things that would be not good.
Looked highly upon.
And during Ramadan, I feel like you also appreciate the struggle and you appreciate the effort more that you're putting in. You know, when you're, like you guys said, when you're consciously making sure you're avoiding certain practices, or you just try to do better, or, you know, learn a new surah, like very small things that you can be doing during Ramadan. I feel like you also appreciate the effort that you're putting in, and it kind of reminds you of why are these practices so important anyways. Not just in Ramadan, why should I be doing them in general? Like, you know, why during Ramadan do I default to not listening to music or not watching as many movies? Like, what's the wisdom behind that to begin with?
It's so funny. Every time I think of Ramadan and how fasting, where you're not eating for such a long period of time, seems so easy to me, but outside of Ramadan, I struggle so much, and I like can't go on a diet. I can't fathom not eating for more than 2 hours at a time. But for Ramadan, you're like, I'm doing this for God, and because it's for God, it seems like it's a lot easier, and because the whole community's doing it, it's not so isolating.
Yeah.
And I always am God conscious, for me at least, because I'm like, I can't argue with you, then God won't accept my fast today.
Yeah.
So,
It's a very deep way to look at it, because essentially I remember one time, you know, what's crazy is it shows us the power of love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because so this is a little bit personal, but I remember there was this one year before Ramadan where I was trying to do like no carbs, right? And it was like, and I was like, okay, you know, we're gonna go 30 days no carbs all of the month before Ramadan, yada yada yada. And that's something that, like, you know, it's something that I was struggling with. And then Ramadan came, and subhanAllah, you know, you go from struggling to have no carbs to now we're saying no water, no food, no nothing at all. And so seeing, subhanAllah, how much more we're willing to give up in them. I'm just kind of using that as an example, how much more we're willing to give up for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as opposed to when it's not something for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Although, of course, a person can go on, you know, a healthy lifestyle change for the sake of Allah. But the idea of Ramadan being an obligatory fast, and the fact of how we're able to do that, it's as if, and I want us to think about this for a moment. Ta'ala is telling us, you struggle to leave all of these bad habits. Here you are leaving your human needs. If you're capable of leaving your human needs, then you best believe you're not going to struggle to leave your bad habit. Like, if I can abandon water for Allah, then I sure as heck can abandon cursing for Allah. And I can abandon, you know, missing good habits I'm supposed to be doing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The idea there is that, you know, we go from, my God, you know, I'm struggling to pray the 5 prayers, to now, alhamdulillah, I feel capable of praying not only the 5 prayers, but 8 rak'ats on top of that. So, you know, one of the things that I try to always remind myself is that Ramadan shows us who we're capable of being. It shows us our God-given potential. It's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is highlighting to us the type of servants of Allah that we're capable of being. And that's a very, very beautiful thing, showing us how much faith Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has. Now, sometimes we think it's just about us having faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but really what we forget is much of it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having faith in us, right? And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, says, "La taqnatu min rahmatillah." Do not give up on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As if it's a reminder that the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is continuous for us even when we stop seeking it, subhanAllah. And so Ramadan is a time to kind of reignite within us that potential that we have being servants of Allah in everything that we do.
That's beautiful to me, because I have this one friend in particular. She kind of resets herself every year. Yeah. Because she believes that God is so merciful in Ramadan, and that she sees what she can become and how good she can be given the opportunity.
Yeah. You know, a lot of times people throw a lot of shade at what is categorically called, you know, Ramadan Muslims.
Yeah.
You know, people that are like, you know, Muslims on steroids during Ramadan, and then the rest of the year they kind of like pack up their Islam and put it away on the side. And so I asked one of my teachers about this, and he says, you know, he's like, I'm proud to be a Ramadan Muslim. And so he said, if what we mean by a Ramadan Muslim is a Muslim that goes above and beyond during Ramadan, then yes, we should all strive to be Ramadan Muslims. We should all strive to be the best Muslims that we can be in the month of Ramadan. It is the month that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala closes all of the doors of the hellfire and opens up all of the doors of Jannah. And the angels call out, Ya baghi al-khayri aqbil. O seeker of good, come forward. O seeker of good, come forward. O person who wants goodness, come forward, right? That's a calling for you and I. That's beautiful. That's wonderful. That's amazing. That's a shout out from the angels to us, right? That's something that we seek and we strive for. But at the same time, he says, if what we're saying is, are we going to be 110% at Ramadan? We should. But if it means the minute that Ramadan ends, we check out of our faith, then that's a problem. So the idea is that when people ask me, how do I know if my Ramadan was accepted? I go back to the scholars of our tradition. One of the things that they highlight to us so beautifully is that an indicator of the acceptance of our Ramadan is the people that we become after Ramadan, the lives that we live after Ramadan. So the whole time in Ramadan, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every single night of Ramadan, He frees people from the hellfire. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free us and our family and our loved ones from the hellfire. Every single night He's freeing people. You don't got to wait for that 27th night. You don't got to go hunting for it. You know what I'm saying? Yes, of course, that is a wonderful thing, and we seek that night. But every single night of Ramadan, as that's happening, the question we need to be asking ourselves is, who are we trying to walk out of Ramadan? When we graduate out of Ramadan, may Allah make us from those who reach Ramadan and reap the rewards of Ramadan, right? And graduate from Ramadan. Who do we want to be when we leave Ramadan? So that's where the idea is, I'm not just a Ramadan Muslim in the sense that I'm only Muslim in Ramadan, but I'm a Ramadan Muslim and I'm the best Muslim I can be in Ramadan. So they just want to, just to kind of see that little bit of differentiation there.
Yeah, and I find myself in Ramadan, it's so much easier to like make my intention, have all these goals that I want to do. And even after Ramadan, like I'll continue to do some of these goals, but like it definitely tapers off afterwards. And it's hard to keep up and maintain everything, especially when you start adding things or a new job or work and school and everything kind of adds up. Yeah. It's just so easy to start like forgetting some things. And then by the time the next Ramadan comes, it's okay, now I have to restart from before, and it's kind of like you don't really have any new goals. You're kind of just redoing what you were doing and trying to maintain that and keep that up.
I agree with what Khawaila is saying. I do think in Ramadan, we put in the effort to kind of cut off all distractions also. Not only does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us, okay, you should be doing these actions and these actions to practice being better Muslims, but I feel like we cancel every other distraction and we make sure to focus on our Ramadan and our spirituality versus on a daily basis when we're back in the real world, I guess you can say, and we're working and we're going to school. It's not a priority anymore for us. We no longer put in that same type of energy. And a lot of times we feel like that's why we dip when we peak in Ramadan. Yeah. And we're growing up today, like our age, young adults, and we're maturing and we continue to learn new things. But it's very hard to set really high goals for ourselves because when we don't reach it, we crash so hard and then we're just completely out of it until the next Ramadan.
So would you guys say that we need to make our Ramadan schedule more realistic so that we're able to implement it throughout, like after Ramadan?
Definitely. And it's easier when people are going to school or work during Ramadan because that schedule kind of will like go on with what you're actually doing. So because I remember in high school when Ramadan was during the summer, it was like completely different. You'd stay up all night, sleep all day.
So what would our Ramadan goals look like a daily schedule that we could set for ourselves that will increase us in one, worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and make us gain that taqwa, which by doing that at the end of Ramadan and even after that, hopefully we are able to constantly practice those things?
I think setting up realistic goals it's essential to making sure that you become a better Muslim. Like if you're not excellent with your 5 salahs and you make sure that that's what you leave Ramadan with, or every Friday you read Surah Al-Kahf, like the things that don't seem so big, but they build the foundation for what is a Muslim.
Yeah, so like habits that you can develop. Honestly, I like having really big goals during Ramadan and trying to achieve them. I mean, I feel like a little bit of a failure when I don't a lot of the time.
Really? I would not want that.
No, but at least I'm like striving towards. But I feel like if I can make it a little better this Ramadan, is keep one simple goal to do every day. Like maybe before I go to sleep, do 2 pages of Quran every day and then keep that habit up. But then still have the goal of finishing the whole Quran during Ramadan.
So like having an unrealistic goal
and
keep you pushing like
to
forward.
keep you going better.
And then having realistic goals so you don't feel like a complete failure.
No, just like one realistic, habitable goal. So that I can keep going after Ramadan.
That'd be smart, actually.
I think it's also important to recognize that you can be a good Muslim in other ways too. You know, like I remember last Ramadan, Maryam had mentioned that one of her goals was to be kind to people. Like an extra act of kindness.
Failed. I'm just kidding.
No, it didn't. I was successful.
And that's something that makes you a better Muslim and you can realistically leave Ramadan doing. You know, so there are a lot of things that we don't also realize strengthen your iman and your taqwa, and we kind of just overlook them because they're not your cookie cutter kind of habits that we're used to hearing about in Ramadan.
Those are just easier to measure. When you talk about like character or improvement in character, those are harder to measure.
Because I feel like we're more conscious about that. Like I feel like for the most part, we try our best to be good to other people and to be kind and smile.
Like
when,
that's just being a basic human.
Yeah, I feel like we tried already to do that.
I honestly had such good results last Ramadan when I was doing one compliment a day for different people.
Okay, then let's start discussing some tips going into Ramadan.
Like one thing that you could do is Ramadan has 4 weeks and it also has 3 sets of 10 days, which are highlighted in our tradition. The first 10 days, the second 10 days, and the last 10 days. And so one of the things is maybe allowing it to be that for the first 10 days, what is a good habit that I'm going to build and what's a bad habit that I'm going to break? For the second 10 days, what's a good habit that I'm going to build and a bad habit that I'm going to break? And for the last 10 days, and so this is how Ramadan becomes a school, right? You walk out of Ramadan, you can say, these are 3 things that have become a part of me, you know? And one of the things to highlight is that actions become habits and habits create patterns, and those patterns of habits create characteristics, right? So now we're evolving our personality into becoming better servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and servers of his creation simply by adding 3 new characteristics this Ramadan and removing 3 bad habits that we have during the month of Ramadan.
I guess the first step into doing that is just reflection and on how you are and the goals that you would like to achieve. So before Ramadan, the first thing, I guess the tip that we were trying to go into is the first thing to do is to have a good talk or a good reflection on yourself, talk with yourself and see what are bad habits. Just be very honest. What are bad habits that I have that I need to improve on and how I could improve on them? And then what are some good habits that I could pick up?
And by the time we release this episode and our listeners get a chance to listen to our episode and kind of gain the tips, there will be a few days before Ramadan starts. Like it'll give us ample time to self-reflect, like you were saying, like just pick up. And it can be really simple bad habits. It can be really easy good habits that you can build, but just to encourage yourself, because I feel like once you see results and you have those little successes, you're so motivated to continue to do better. And then that's where, Maryam, I feel like maybe what seems like an unrealistic goal becomes more realistic, because you're suddenly really encouraged and you're on that path of motivation. And you know you're during a blessed month. Yeah, you're just really energized at that point.
I always remember this quote that people told me. They're like, you can't run a marathon in a day, but if you try to run a marathon, maybe I'll run 4 miles, which is more than I've ever ran before. That's why I like setting big goals, even though people tell me not to do that.
Well, I guess people work differently. So that's what motivates you. Other people, if they can't achieve the goal, then they just won't do anything at all. So it just depends on like figuring out what works with you.
Which is where the self-reflection comes in.
I'm like very specific. You guys should see my organizer. Like
I believe
by the hour. That's like what
it's tabbed, color coded.
It really is
highlighted.
But I'm sure you get a lot more done than maybe some of us that don't do that.
My to-do list is on a napkin somewhere.
I feel like Inara's pretty realistic with what she wants to do.
Yeah, I really try my best to sit down, like Khoila was saying, and like reflect and write out my goals, because I feel like that's the first step to being successful, is by really like envisioning what you want to accomplish and how you're going to get there. So by setting, for people it may be different. I like to do a day-to-day schedule and then a weekly kind of schedule. And I feel like by doing that, I'm able to check off to see what I am able to do.
What I appreciate about what you said, sister, was that you said, and you can constantly revisit them and rearrange. Because what happens to a lot of people is that they wake up and they don't accomplish the goals the first day. They're like, oh, well, I guess I'm never going to be a good person. And then they just kind of move on with their life, right?
Yeah.
They're like, man, I guess it's something I've heard a lot. I guess it's just not for me. Eating healthy is not for me. Reading Quran is not for me. Wearing hijab is not for me. And people throw a lot of shade, and because the hijab is such a sensitive topic for me to talk about as a male. And particularly hijab is on a personal level, it's something that just inspires me so much. The idea of a woman walking out covered in a way that allows her to be in a constant state of worship is just something that's so amazing to me. And it's an act of worship that a man can never get, right? And so in Ramadan, we have the opportunity to rearrange our acts of worship. And so with the example of hijab that I mentioned, people get a lot of hate for taking off their hijab, and people get a lot of hate for not wearing the hijab the correct way. And of course, we believe as Muslims that hijab is an obligation and it's something that a sister is required to do. If that's something that you're not doing, I don't care what anybody says. Use Ramadan to say, I'm going to wear hijab on Fridays when I go out, or I'm going to wear it on the weekend. And if people say, oh, you're a convertible hijab, you wear it sometimes and don't wear it other times, tell them to pack up and go home. And if they have questions, they can come to me and I'll answer it for them. Because our spirituality is our journey, right? Yeah. And I use this phrase journey a lot, but it's because nobody can tell you what chapter you're on and what chapter you're supposed to be on, because nobody was on the journey with you from the beginning. You can be living in your house and your journey looks completely differently from the other folks living in your house. So work on where you're at. Obviously, again, hijab is something that's an obligation that is meant to be worn consistently and with commitment. But Ramadan is a time to revisit these things that we've abandoned. And it's okay if you are not ready to commit to it wholeheartedly, and you pace yourself in progressing and you show yourself what you're capable of. You know what I mean? And so I just want to encourage not giving up, that if in day one of Ramadan, you think you're going to wake up and you're going to be a shaykha, or you're going to be like your mom, or like that khaltu at the masjid that gives the dance, or like you're going to wake up and you're going to sound like Sheikh Jamal. That would be very scary if you woke up and sound like Sheikh. May Allah bless and preserve Sheikh Jamal and give him a lengthy life and allow us to benefit from him. But the idea there is that seeds of faith grow the same way that seeds in the earth grow. Yeah. They require nourishment, they require light, they require consistency, and they require care. So we need to provide that to our seeds of faith for them to blossom and grow, inshallah ta'ala.
And I think that's such a beautiful reminder, because a lot of people, we're in a society of comparison. We compare each other, like it's just human nature to compare where you're at to where someone else is at. So to remember that your journey in Islam is completely your own is something really beautiful. And it kind of segues into my next asking point, which is another human aspect, is community, which is what Ramadan really brought to me. So I'm going to miss that with this whole Corona thing happening and the isolation. This whole Corona thing. But the lack of community during this Ramadan is really getting me down. So how do you kind of keep community still a part of Ramadan during this time?
I think one of the ways to do that is by joining the Mecca Movement's Recharge Outlet sessions. We're going to be having chill sessions where, it's not even about it being a plug, even though it's exactly the textbook definition of a plug. So the Recharge Outlets are going to be like little sessions where sisters can come together and brothers can come together and just vibe with one another, share their thoughts, express themselves, have a virtual of thought if you want to connect with each other. Another thing is that our phones have us kind of deceived into thinking we're connected and disconnected at the same time. So choosing to make this a time to really revisit relationships that have been abandoned and family members that we haven't touched base with. We have a lot of time on our hands in a particular way, but also no time on our hands. So dedicating a particular time every single day in Ramadan to literally visit people, like socially, virtually visit people that you otherwise wouldn't have visited outside of this time. And in Ramadan, one thing that we can do this year is look for quality in conversation as opposed to quantity. Right now, we're not going to be posting pictures of 1,000 people in the masajid, right? We're not looking at quantity this Ramadan. This is a Ramadan of quality.
I also have another question, Shaykh Tariq. What kind of tips or advice do you have for individuals that are still going to school and still working during Ramadan?
I think, it's going to sound really cliche, but having kind of what you guys were talking about earlier, having a routine, a Ramadan routine, right? So morning and evening azkar to be a part of that. Waking up 5 minutes before the adhan of Fajr, chugging some water and eating some dates, but also making dua during the time of suhoor in that last third of the night, 5 minutes before Fajr comes in, if you can't wake up for a lengthy suhoor, and really just small things like that. 5 minutes before iftar, pausing and making dua, as that is a very special time to be making dua, an act of volunteering to do service. Never in my life did I imagine that we at Mecca would be distributing food baskets to our own community. Like that is something, subhanAllah, it's so surreal that we're getting calls from our own community saying we need basic groceries and we cannot leave our house right now because of the situation that we're in. So this situation that we're in is very unique, but it creates a particularly unique Ramadan.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, this is a different Ramadan from any Ramadan you've ever experienced before. And it could be uniquely positive, and frankly speaking, it could also be equally uniquely negative. And so what each of us have the opportunity to do is create a Ramadan that will leave a legacy of what it was like to have the first Ramadan in a pandemic that we've ever experienced. That's just really, creating those small trends, volunteering once a week with Imam, who's doing great work in the city, or with those who are in need. Those are wonderful things that we could be doing. Small things, reading the Quran, committing to a book, with the Heart and Mind by Sheikh Mikael Smith. It's a wonderful book that I encourage people to read. Muhammad Man and Prophet by Adil Salahi is a seerah book that's very thick and you can
I have the Heart and Mind.
I've been trying to get through that one for 2 years now.
Everybody's trying to flex on what they have in their library and what they've read. But the idea there is that to commit to a book and read it.
I think especially now with everyone either working from home and staying at home, it's going to be even more important to set up some sort of schedule and actually going with it. Because a lot of what people are doing now are just focusing on food. Like everyone has their jokes about like, okay, we already ate all of our quarantine food, or they're spending a lot of time on social media doing those videos. What are those videos called again? TikToks. There you go. Oh my God. Like doing just like wasting a lot of time trying to like enjoy life rather than focusing on what we can do to improve.
Going back to Shaykh Tariq's point on service, can you kind of elaborate on why service is important in Islam? Because I know I went to one of your lectures before and you really inspired me. So I want our listeners to get some of that.
I think when we think about service, I would like to correct that sentiment. And I'm not just trying to do a little humble brag here. I'm being honest. It's not that you were inspired by me. You were inspired by Islam.
Yeah.
Because people fade away. If you spend enough time with me, I assure you'll be disappointed.
I don't think so.
But we are inspired by Islam, and all that happens is that sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses us as tools to illuminate people's perspective on faith and the role of faith in their lives. You don't say anything wrong. I just want to make that clear. With regards to service, I think ultimately we think that when we do service, we're doing people a favor. And reality is, and as you guys get older and as I get older, this becomes a very clear realization that as we serve others, we're definitely serving ourselves more than we're serving them. Because you might be serving them food, but you're serving yourself gratitude. And you might be serving them water, but you're serving yourself the water of Jannah. And serving our spiritual needs by fulfilling the physical needs of others is really in our advantage and more than it is in theirs. And it is for that reason that the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا تُمْصَرُونَ وَتُرْزَقُونَ بِضُعَفَائِكُم. He says, you will be given victory and sustenance through your service to those who are in need or those who are less capable. Think about that. That's a very big statement. What the Prophet ﷺ is saying is your success, your victory, and your provisions are based off of the state those who are less, or those who have less, or those who are in need. And so this tells us that the equation is as follows. The greater we are to those who are in need, the greater we will be in this life, and the greater we will be in the eyes of God. That makes it very easy for me to understand that my number one responsibility is serving the needs of the creation, with regards to the creation, while fulfilling my responsibilities to the Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why you find the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he helped those who are in need without exception. Did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam insist that provisions be given to those who are Muslims only? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam defended the poor and the needy and helped the poor and the needy, without exception, without any discrimination, without any exclusivity. So Muslims become ambassadors of service to others.
Okay, so thank you, Shaykh Tariq, for your time and for answering some of these questions for us. We really appreciate it, and we loved having you on the show, honestly.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wallahi, it's been an honor and a pleasure. If I can just say one thing, it's that it's sisters like you all, each and every single one of you who's listening, who are gonna change the way that people not only view Islam, but people view the world. And so I commend you for being yourselves. I commend you for striving for excellence. If there's one thing that we need to do moving forward every single day as we go towards Ramadan is make dua. Make dua for ourselves, make dua for our families, make dua for one another, and make dua for the global community. They're the greatest weapon that each and every single one of us have, the greatest superpower that each and every single one of us have is the power to make dua, to talk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and speak to Him. And believe me when I tell you, you and I are good enough to be making dua, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always answer. So Jazakallah khairan again. Much love and much respect. Please keep my family and I in your du'as. Wassalamu alaikum.
Personally, I love our Ramadan series. I love this time of the year. And I'm not just trying to say it like, oh, because it's Ramadan and whatever. But I feel like the stories that we share in the episodes that we have are so much more meaningful, honestly. And it really gives us a time, like we said, as one of the tips to self-reflect, while also appreciating the Ramadan atmosphere. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in and listening to this week's episode of To Whom It May Concern Ramadan series. Please subscribe, like, and follow us on social media. We appreciate all the support we've been receiving so far. If you don't already follow us, you could find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at The Modern Skeps. You can also find our full-length episodes on YouTube. Please continue to tune in every week on Tuesday mornings. That's when we drop our latest episodes. If you have any ideas you'd like us to discuss, please email us at modernskeptics@gmail.com. Sincerely, The Modern Skeptics. P.S. May we all be blessed with the gift of Ramadan.